Now you're very welcome back. It is time for us to chat wrestling. I'm going to say American-Irish, Irishman in America. Jack Moody is maybe the fairest way to do this. I only found out your real name when we met outside the building about 15, 20 minutes ago, and we've been DMing for a while on,
for
on
a couple
Twitter.
of
So
months.
do you want to go by Lorcan or do you want to go by Jack?
We can interchange. I guess it's the alter ego is Jack, and Lorcan is my name. So I'm a lifelong wrestling fan turned wrestler. I'm very happy to be here.
Which becomes a very obvious first question, which is why a couple of years ago did you decide to dip your toe into the ring as opposed to being a fan?
Well, I guess this is a story of hopping off the corporate ladder and springboarding onto the pro wrestling ladder, so to speak. Not quite as elegantly as a Shelton Benjamin, but close enough. Basically using the significant time and energy surplus that comes with taking yourself out of a corporate environment and putting that to work towards something that I've wanted for a very long time, which is to be a pro wrestler and to wrestle internationally and to basically leave no stone unturned in pursuit of this goal.
So you were working as a copywriter.
That's right.
At the time. A couple of years ago.
Yep.
Right in the middle of the pandemic, at a time when independent wrestling is probably at its lowest ebb for a while and plenty of challenges, and you decide wrestling's for me.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say I decided then. I mean, I kind of knew from a young age that wrestling, I had a particularly special connection with wrestling. I'm sure a lot of listeners can attest to this, being a kid on a Saturday morning, turning on Sky One, watching Livewire, watching SmackDown, and just being totally...
The edited SmackDown is where you got the...
Yeah, exactly, no chair shots.
Yeah.
So I've just been totally enthralled in the spectacle of it, and then it turns into this huge passion and obsession really that never went away. I think for a lot of people, they watch it from 8 to 12, and then once it's deemed to be kind of uncool, or once you go to secondary school, basically, a lot of people fall off the wagon. And that was probably the time for me where I just doubled down on it and became so fascinated with the art of wrestling and not just the storylines and the characters, but actually how the moves were carried out, how matches were structured, and then I think once you hit that level of fandom, it's you're honestly down the rabbit hole and you're just hooked for life. There might have been a year from age 8 to now where I maybe was had a passive interest in it, but yeah, it's just been an obsession, and it just grew and grew and grew. And I think for the pandemic was a critical time in that. I think for a lot of people, they're right, well, what am I doing with my life? What do I actually want to do? I think life can get away from a lot of people, me included, where you're just going through the rigmarole of corporate life. And the pandemic made me realize there's more to this, and there's something, I have this in me that I really want to do. I really want to try it at least. And I would encourage anyone who has a similar interest or a passion for it that isn't going away to do something about it and try it, because you never know where it can take you. It's not for everyone. Obviously, it's hugely physically demanding and taxing, and you have to sacrifice a lot. But it's so fulfilling and rewarding to go from fan to wrestler, and to that journey alone is worth pursuing and experiencing. So you don't have to have a destination in mind. It's more about just enjoying the fact that you are doing this, something you've loved for so long, and just going for it. And that is a beautiful feeling.
Were you already based in the USA for work at that stage, or had you moved over?
No. So I would say last summer things took an interesting turn where I probably had about 9 months training under my belt. Okay. And I was in Denver, Colorado, and I began training with a group called Primos Wrestling. And I guess I impressed the right people at the right time.
I'm assuming they're based around the Clones in Puerto Rico, are they? Or is
that's their origin, yeah.
Okay.
So they basically saw something in me and were willing to give me an opportunity. So very grateful to them for that. They put me on one of their summer shows, and then that just unlocked a kind of myriad of opportunities to go wrestle in Salt Lake City, various parts of Colorado, and then you're just riding this wave of momentum, and you're kind of a runaway train, and that's what wrestling is. It's a momentum game. One show leads to another. You get recognized, and people want you on their show, because I think anyone who has done a J1 to a more remote part of the US can probably attest to the fact that Americans are very welcoming and accommodating of Irish people. Way more so than we would be to them, I would say.
Is this why you're wearing a tricolour when you come out to the ring then?
Yeah, well, it's part of the gimmick, yeah. So, I think, I'm a super pale, super Irish, I look Irish, and I have a very distinct style in the ring, so I think that sets me apart a little bit. And then it's just, once they give you the opportunity, it's on you to then validate that decision in their mind. And that's been the case for the last, like since last summer. So another full year's gone past, and I've just got back from a few months over there and wrestling on bigger shows than I imagined possible when I started. So that goes back to the fact that, you just never know. Like everyone's road in wrestling is different, and mine is unique in that I've gone to the States at an earlier stage, but it's worked out tremendously. I'm very proud of it.
No risk then that you're putting on the spray fake tan then?
Absolutely not. No, that's. I mean, I commend people who do it for the entertainment factor. But when I'm over there, it's like as pale as I'll be shading from hiding from the sun, and that's just part of the appeal. Once you bring something different to the table, something unique, and your character is on point. So whether I'm a good guy or a bad guy, you want people to react or to care about you being there. So from the moment you're coming through the curtain till the moment you're finished your match, that is your airtime. So it's like you want to convey who you are, give them a compelling reason to care about what you're doing, and then obviously you want them to kind of generate some interest in you for future shows. So that's part of the gig.
What was your inspiration then? Because I've been reading that you were obviously very interested in the Super Juniors, the technicians, maybe some New Japan Pro Wrestling. Maybe that was a bit of inspiration. So when you were thinking about the style of wrestler you wanted to be, was that what you were hoping to emulate in the first place? I
would say I always had a deep appreciation for that style, and I mean, I think it's so intricate in its nature that it takes a huge amount of practice to refine and hone. And it just so happens that Fight Factory Pro Wrestling, which is where I started here in Dublin, that is kind of a style that's like the home style. So I was able to train with some of the like Europe's best, like LJ Cleary, Fabio, Martin Steers, Debbie Keitel, Saviours of Destiny. Plus you had like cornerstones of the Irish wrestling scene over the last decade, such as Justy, Phil Boyd, Katie Harvey, who are kind of nurturing and ushering in the new generation. And it just so happens that the style that is most on show there is kind of technical catch as catch can style. And I think once I started to experience and to see what was involved, I was just hooked on it. Like, I think you can be a fan, but then once you're actually in the ring executing flashy wrist lock reversals, it's just a thrill like no other. It's really nerdy and geeky, but like that's just what I love. So and Fight Factory is just a perfect place to learn that style. Like it is internationally renowned for that style. Like I've been in LA, like training in LA, and people would see my Fight Factory tank top, they're like, oh, Fight Factory, like, and they'll know wrestlers who've come through the ranks. And I mean, the track record speaks for itself. Like you have like Finn Balor, Becky Lynch, JD McDonough, Lyra Valkyria, all coming through the ranks at Fight Factory, and they've all made it to WWE. So and like that conveyor belt of pro wrestling talent that is Fight Factory continues to churn out amazing talent, and I'm very proud to be a part of it.
Does it help when you're, I don't mean to use the phrase chasing the dream, but you know exactly what I mean by that, when you're thinking of, I'm going to try and realise what I wanted to do and to become a professional wrestler, that in recent years you watch Becky Lynch headlining at WrestleMania, you watch Finn Balor, who is like incredibly up with the Judgment Day currently, has wrestled at WrestleMania, so is Sheamus, he's been a world champion. All these people doing so well, even Walter holding the Intercontinental as Gunter, even he had to change his name. Many people would have seen him in Dublin wrestling with OTT. When you see that, in some ways I guess that provides you can look at that and say there is an avenue into the higher reaches of American wrestling here.
100%. And I would say a lot of current trainees would point to the Finn Balor debut on Raw, Becky Lynch, the kind of meteoric rise she had as the impetus for them to pursue it. Previously, I mean, it would have been, I was always like a huge admirer of Fergal Devitt, like when he was Prince Devitt in New Japan, and he was kind of the standard bearer for Irish wrestling at the time. And then of course Sheamus joined WWE at circa like 2009. So I think that's hugely influential for people who are thinking about it, and to have a template to aspire to or someone to measure up to. I think it's hugely important. I mean, we can kind of write ourselves off sometimes. It's like it's not feasible, or it's not accessible for us, this little nation. But like, there's no reason why we can't do it, and we can continue to defy the odds, so to speak, in terms of producing amazing talent.
Well, even when you consider Drew McIntyre became the first British-born champion as world champion of WWE not that long ago, and you're thinking, hold on, there's Irish wrestlers who've done this before him, and that's when the British wrestling scene has got a much longer history than here. And even for most of the Irish wrestlers who would have started off on this island, would have primarily gone to wrestle in the UK.
Yeah, I think that's like Fergal Devitt would have gone over to NWA Hammerlock. So there was, at that time, that was like 2001, there was no Irish pro wrestling school. So him and Paul Tracy had to go over and learn an NWA Hammerlock, and then basically take those learnings and basically started a new school like NWA Ireland, which then transitioned into Fight Factory. So I think the UK has been kind of a fertile ground for Irish wrestlers in the past, continues to be that way, and that's somewhere I'd like to wrestle as well.
Look, I suppose they're in a bizarre place at the moment, from both the Me Too movement a couple of years ago and NXT UK, and then eventually the fall of NXT UK probably hurt a lot of the independent companies that were over there. I wonder if your path might have been different if the UK perhaps been more vibrant rather than going straight to the States. Possibly.
I think I've always had like an affinity to the States. One of the best summers of my life was a J1 in Colorado, and that kind of spurred this lifelong back and forth between here and Denver. So I always had a connection there, which helps. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Like the UK scene, who knows what heights it could have reached had there not been those major setbacks. I'm sure it'll rebuild, and it is rebuilding. And I guess like even with NXT UK folding, there is talk of NXT Europe, and that could be bigger and better. You don't know, and it could involve events in Paris and Barcelona, London, Dublin. So interested to see how that develops.
Tell me how you develop as a wrestler then, because you go from going in 1 day a week, very much part-time, doing the day job. I'm going to go in on the beginner course, get a feel for this, maybe learn how to do a back bump properly, how to do a front bump, and that turns to you doing, by your own words, flashy wrist lock maneuvers and reversals and a lot of technical wrestling. How does it go from that day going into where you are right now?
It's like a lifestyle shift, I would say. I basically knew I had to treat it like an academic study. And you have people going back to college later in life to do like an MBA or a master's, but for me, like the only field worthy of study was pro wrestling, and that's why I went to Fight Factory. So I guess it's literally treating it like a degree or a college course, and you want to go to a renowned, reputable school, and that's exactly what Fight Factory is. So it involves like literally studying wrestling. Like obviously I enjoy it as a fan and I appreciate it deeply, but I guess the studying it and like playing back clips, recording them on my phone, showing them to my trainers and say, I want to know how to do this move, let's practice it 20 times. That is those are my afternoons, Tuesdays, Thursdays, sometimes the weekend too, going over these moves that I've saved on my phone. And yeah, it's a kind of rudimentary approach, but it pays off. It's like you see something you want to emulate, the only way to do that is to practice, and that's been my journey.
How difficult is that journey though? Because compared to maybe you hear about the early stages, your body is callousing up a little bit, maybe from taking the bumps and hitting the ropes, to the point that maybe you're getting to the point that you're fine tuning as opposed to just learning those very basic things. Yeah,
I guess it's just about having the time to focus on your body and your diet. Like I honestly don't think this would have been possible for me had I stayed in the corporate lane.
Did it affect your career?
No, I mean I think they're two very separate things. Like I'm self-employed as an independent copywriter, and that is the enabler of my dream chasing, because I don't have to be in an office 9 to 6, and that means I don't sit from 9 to 6, and my body isn't going through the toll of commuting or just sitting in an office, or all the energy you expend like just small talk with colleagues, like that kind of exhausts you. So like I would have been daydreaming about this in years gone past, but the reality of 9 to 6 work just made it feel much more inaccessible, because I just don't have the energy. Where am I going to fit it in? The constraints of corporate life were so kind of all-consuming. So I think the biggest difference is having autonomy over my schedule. Means I can focus on yoga and Pilates and stretching and sauna and swimming in the sea and doing all the things I can do to make sure I have the best chance of thriving in the industry. So
it sounds quite different to the guys in the 80s who were mainly on cocaine.
Unbelievable.
And partying full time.
Yeah. All credit to them. Like they had an incredible life, but again, that is not sustainable, and sadly a lot of them meet a sad end when they go down that road. So I think wrestlers of this generation are much more like health conscious. A lot of them are gamers. teenagers, like they don't have the vices of the booze and the parties.
Yeah, it seems
as much.
It's Nintendo Switch as opposed to hitting the town for
Yeah, I mean, and that's perfect, because I mean, you're not putting your body through, you're not like poisoning your body with substances. You're focused on your sleep and your well-being, and that's another thing I focus on, is like always getting enough sleep, making sure I'm in the right state mentally, and just kind of treating that as a priority over the corporate rat race, which I did for many years prior.
Were you going in with a reasonable athletic background before you started?
Somewhat. I mean, I wasn't particularly athletic in school. Like, I was quite puny, actually. I didn't make the rugby team, didn't even try. Played soccer, football, surfed a bit in college. Always had an interest in like the gym and weightlifting, and I think, honestly, like subconsciously, I probably kept myself in physically good shape, knowing that I would eventually have the balls to go for it.
What age were you when you decided to go for it, by the way?
Well, I mean, I'm 34 now.
Okay.
So I'm like actually like kind of elder statesman.
You're not quite DDP, but
no, but like honestly, he'd be a huge inspiration to me. Like, that's someone who decided to go for it at 30, maybe over 30. Yeah. So I was 32 when I decided I wanted to do it. And again, that is in a country like Ireland, that is, would be balked at as like a show.
I'd say there were voices among family and friends. Like, what are you doing?
What do you do? Like, you just like, this is unrealistic. I think we're terrible at setting boundaries around ourselves in terms of what's possible. I think that's why I love America so much, is like that no matter what stage of life you're at, people never give up. Like, just say you're married in the States and your life explodes, your wife divorces you, people just move state, they change their lives, they start again. Whereas I think here we're quite regimented in like, this is the way we should live. And I honestly think like post 30 in Ireland, the way we can live can be quite sedate, and like just like to go there and get, like, match up on mortgage and do this and just be normal. So yeah, it's an unlikely story of starting at 32 and going to wrestle in the States within 9 months it's unusual. Yeah. But again, the fire is so strong that it kind of fuels you. So yeah, very
Did
fortunate.
your wrestling coaches consider you to be a fairly quick learner then, if you're going accelerated that quickly?
I think so. I mean, I would be. I get a lot of encouragement from my trainers, like LJ Cleary in particular has been very instrumental in
He's an incredible wrestler.
Absolutely. Europe's best, I would say. He's been so instrumental in helping me learn, because his style would be something I would love to emulate. So I think it's I'm very proud to represent Fight Factory when I do go to the States or elsewhere in the world, because they've given me so much. They've given me the platform to succeed, and I would encourage anyone who has the same interest or a passion inside them to do it. Fight Factory is the place to go. Every couple of months they run these 10-week beginner courses, so it's a great way to kind of figure out, like, is it for you? Learn the fundamentals, literally learn the ropes, and then see if you want to use that as a platform to develop further. So I would encourage anyone to keep an eye on Fight Factory's Twitter at FFPW Ireland, and their Facebook as well, for any upcoming beginner courses, because I've been a product of that, alumni of that, and proud to be to do it.
You picked up an injury not that long ago, because we were due to chat, I think, about 5 months ago. I think was our original plan, and then you were like, I just got injured, let's wait till I get back. I'll be back in Ireland, we'll have a chat then. So obviously injuries are setbacks along the way. Were there any other difficulties that you felt along your journey over the last 2 years then?
Honestly, it was just the physical constraints. It was like, that was the big question when I started. I'm like, right, at 32, realistically, how far can I go, and how far will my body allow me to go? And honestly, I think due to the fact that I've been doing DDP yoga for many, many years, coming up on a decade now, I do Pilates, I kind of tailor my lifestyle to my physical well-being. That has given me an edge, so I'm probably, doing better than I should be at this age. Now, injuries are kind of a constant reality with this industry. So I think, the case in point, like November, I'm training in Florida 4 or 5 times a week for 3 hours at a time for 6 weeks. It was just a case of, right, like this is too much. So I kind of hit the wall. So that kind of meant that I was laid up for a month. Well, I got to watch the World Cup in its entirety, literally nearly every game, lying on the couch. So not the worst way to recover. But it's just a case of making sure you're stretching properly and you're training the right muscles and not just trying to look big. It's all about working smarter, not harder.
When you find yourself in Florida training at that point, it raised the obvious question. You've gone into WWE's now a hotbed for their development. You're in AEW territory when you're in Florida as well. Was that part of the reason of going towards Florida, or what brought you there?
Yeah, so it's funny, I actually went to AEW's pay-per-view Revolution, which was, I believe, March of 2022.
Yeah.
And while I was in town, I'm like, oh, the Flatbacks Pro Wrestling School is in Orlando, and that's run by former WWE guys Sean Spears and Tyler Breeze. So I actually just stopped by. I was in touch with them before and just said I'd like to pop in for like a private session and just to get a feel for it. And they basically encouraged me to come back for their, like, it's an 8-week course they run, and I could see that as a potential platform to go even further, because I think once you get those like seals of approval from those kind of guys, they can put you places that you wouldn't get yourself unless you had 10 years or 15 years.
Yeah, I mean, you're grinding out, say, in Denver, but you're going to probably be spotted by the right people when
in Florida, Orlando, exactly. So it's a real hotbed for pro wrestling. So that was obviously it's a nice place to spend October and November when, you know, we know what it's like here in Dublin. So yeah, I'm actually planning on going back there later this year, and Tyler Breeze is actually making his return, so that'll be a match I'd be very interested in. He was retired for a number of years, so that'll be fun. Student-teacher matchup.
Yeah,
potentially.
I guess it's one of those as well where you've retained your fandom as part of this as well. Just before we come in, you mentioned you've been to AEW not that long ago, and you really, really enjoy the AEW product.
Oh yeah, that'd be my like my weekly fix. I think it's just the style of wrestling kind of resonates with me more. So I'm constantly like taking video clips of in-match segments and trying to replicate those.
So who do you like then?
I'd be a big Kenny Omega fan.
Yeah.
Very much into that kind of technical style, like the Motor City Machine Guns, Chris Sabin in particular. That would actually be a dream match of mine. Someone I think I would match up well with, and it would be an honour to share the ring with him.
Daniel Bryan,
absolutely. Yeah. So those the guys who are on top, like the Young Bucks, but Kenny would be probably my most favorite. I think he's like the most complete wrestler at the moment. Hopefully get to see him in London in August.
Yeah, I mean, this is mental. If you consider Dave Meltzer's prediction was probably 50k would be good going for All In.
Yeah.
Looks like, with still a world title match to be announced, CM Punk not officially on the bill just yet, they could go 70,000-80,000.
Yeah, easy. So I mean, I'm kind of been holding off on buying my ticket because I just don't know where I'll be at that time. But it's getting to the point where you kind of need to buy it now for fear of missing out, which is insane because it's Wembley Stadium. And I'd say in the next few weeks we'll probably know the main event, and at that point you could be looking at a surge of interest. To like 10,000 tickets could be snapped up. So I might see there. Well,
it's kind of exciting though, isn't it, that we had the best part of 20 years where WWE were the company and the only company effectively, and like they plundered the indies, they plundered Ring of Honor, and they brought all their top stars, and for about 10 years you were looking at all the Ring of Honor stars going through NXT and then onto the main roster. Now there is legitimately a few options for people to make money on TV in the States right now. Yeah,
very viable. Impact's doing great. I mean, obviously you have a Ring of Honor which is attached to AEW, so it's never been a better time. And I think going back to our previous point about seeing potential avenues towards your goal, whereas if it might be like seeing a Finn Balor, seeing a JD McDonough, seeing a Lyra Valkyria, also seeing viable companies that are successful and they are potential employers for people in this industry. So I think having just a one horse race with WWE, you know, I mean, it's great for them and all, but I think now with AEW and Ring of Honor and Impact doing well, and just the indie scene thriving in general, it makes it feel more accessible, which is what that can be great inspiration to people in similar situations. I'm
sure you're going to say to me, I wouldn't close the door to anywhere. Would Mexico and Japan potentially appeal to you if you're a technician?
Yeah, very much so. Those would be two at the top of the list, particularly Japan. I think that's a Korakuen Hall, maybe somewhere like that would be a dream come true. Again, it's just about getting there and getting recognised, and it's somewhere where the bar is so high, and rightfully so, to make it there. But I think that'd be an absolute dream. And just having watched so many Super Junior matches over the years, it'd be kind of very surreal to actually, you know, be in a similar setting, maybe not at that level, but, you know, in a Tokyo or in Osaka. That'd be kind of out of this world.
Tell us about your character then, because one thing getting physically ready. I watched you cut a promo on a Facebook video yesterday, which I think was in Temple Bar, possibly.
Yeah.
I think you
last
were
summer.
Yeah, I think you were plugging your teachers and you were plugging the wrestling school, and you were saying, you know, you're here to take over essentially as almost the character. Tell us about your character, whether it be face or heel.
Yeah, so I guess, like, I mean, most people, if they're working in some industry, like, they'll have a kind of fake corporate persona designed to thrive in that environment. And the wrestling industry is no different. Whereas, like, I have my character is basically myself with the volume turned up. Jack Moody is an international man of mystery. He's someone who, like, is carefree, travels the world, can turn up anywhere at any time, and I can be a good guy or a bad guy depending on the circumstances. So I've become adept at, like, figuring out ways to antagonize fans, or figure out ways to get.
You're not quite slapping kids like MJF.
No, absolutely not. But, you know, verbally I can be quite cutting when I need to be. And I think, especially in America, that's such an interesting place to be, where, you know, they want to embrace the Irishman, but what if the Irishman doesn't want to be embraced by the Americans? What if he feels he's above them? What if he feels like, you know, he's internationally renowned and well travelled and sophisticated, and they don't have passports? And so it's those kind of ways can be very, like, that gets under their skin, and you can turn cheers into boos very quickly, and that's so much fun. That's like kind of pantomime style villain.
So you prefer working heel then, do you?
I enjoy both. I mean, I think that my wrestling style is more of a face, I would say, and I've kind of deliberated on what kind of character direction to take based on the style of wrestling that I like, because it's quite evasive and somewhat impressive in the sense that I'm evading attacks through means that are quite flashy and intricate,
which is naturally going to get you a cheer.
Exactly. So it's a case of, when I am a heel, it's like, okay, well, I can tone some of these things down.
Chin locks.
Yeah, exactly. And so, you know, sometimes I have to put the chain wrestling on the shelf, sadly, but it's for the greater good of putting on a show and having kind of a compelling match for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, where people are invested and they care about the outcome.
What's the reality then when you go back over, whether that's to Florida or whether it's to Denver, and you're looking to get bookings? How does that work from there?
I mean, at this point, I have very good connections with a lot of the promoters there, and that kind of stemmed from last summer, where, you know, one show turned into several. So it's a case of letting people know when you're available, really. It's just, at this point, you know, it's like going to conferences and networking. You go to these shows and you get to know people, and they're, you know, they want to extend the olive branch and give you an opportunity. So I'm very fortunate that I have made very strong connections in these parts of the world, which makes it easier then to get on shows.
Because people hear about the grueling on-the-road nature of being one of the big companies. When you're working indie, you're trying to pick up as much work as you possibly can. Yeah. Probably a lot of travel involved. How much of a slog is the lifestyle?
It's, I would say I wouldn't have the most intense. Like, there's some indie wrestlers who are, like, on the go constantly and, like, racking up, like, 50 plus flights, or maybe more, like maybe 100 flights a year. Like, I wouldn't be on that level anywhere near. But it is grueling. It's like the constant moving around. Like, being on planes is never fun. Going to airports is not fun. Not good for your body. So it's a case of knowing my limits. I think I was dealt the lesson last year when I realized, okay, I've hit the wall, I need to take a break for a month or two. So I guess I don't want to absorb too much punishment.
And you're going to have to look out for yourself, because naturally the people who are booking you, they see you as a person who's on the card for that night. Your own goodwill or your own particular welfare is not that important to them.
No, I mean, like, yeah, you hate to say it like that, but it's true. Like, you are an asset to them, to their show. So yeah, sometimes you have to say no. I mean, that's like sometimes there's shows you want to do, but you mightn't feel you're healthy enough or you're ready for it, if you're recovering from an injury, for example. So sometimes you just have to know when to say no, and know when you've reached your limit, or when you have to take a step back, because, you know, if you just keep going full tilt, hell for leather, like, you will hit the wall. That's just the nature of the business.
You're home now at the moment. Is there ever any draw towards potentially going for, I guess, a competing company? I would say an OTT. I saw a good bit of OTT before the pandemic, and some of the wrestlers they were booking was just insane. They had Jushin Liger, they had Pac, they've had Session Mark Martina, they've had Walter, they've had Jordan Devlin. Like, it's been incredible, some of the people they've attracted. We were just saying, I think back in 2018, it was one of the only places in the world where you could see AEW contracted people up against WWE wrestlers, and someone from New Japan might be in the next match. But they've built like a really interesting ecosystem within Ireland for themselves, and they sell out events regularly. Is OTT somewhere you would like to wrestle at some point?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Eventually, I think it's just a case of me being here long enough in the country to train at their school and become more familiar with the booker. I mean, I think I've taken an unusual path in that I kind of once I had 9 months training under my belt, I was immediately gone across the pond. So I really haven't had time to dedicate, because I think I would need to be here for a sustained period of time just to embed myself into that ecosystem. But definitely on the wish list. It's just a case of making the time and being here long enough, because I am back and forth quite a lot. It makes that I'm just a transient guy right now.
Because as much as you can probably make your name in the States, naturally the indigenous scene, if I want to call it that, here in Ireland is going to be largely based on probably the wrestling school you're associated with, the time that you spend training there, as opposed to almost like you're looking to be flown in as an outsider to a card there potentially. Yeah,
very much so. And actually in about 2 weeks time, Fight Factory presents the Fresh Life Summer Party, which is basically Ireland's Summer Slam. So that'll be Friday night, July 7th. I'll be performing there, and that's going to be a show full of top European talent. So very excited. That's my first match back in Dublin since last August, which is crazy. So very excited for that.
Do you enjoy performing at home?
Yeah, I mean, it's such a. You can get your friends to come see. I mean, I can't get my friends to hop on a flight to Denver for one show, or California or Florida. So I guess when you're home, it's a special feeling because you can round up some crew, like your family, loved ones, friends, who have all been very supportive. And it's also BYOB. People can bring a bag of cans. I would encourage anyone who's interested in some have a passive interest or a passionate interest in wrestling to come check out the show and support Irish wrestling.
Indie shows are crazy. Again, you talk about bring your own beer. I remember being at the National Stadium at a show, and Orange Cassidy was just sitting there watching the main event, and we got chatting to him. And next thing, 6 months later, he's a TV champion on TV. You don't get that naturally in many other, say, entertainment events that you might go to. Yeah, quite participatory, and I would encourage anyone who,
has an interest in the wrestling scene. Like, you can go, you can cheer, boo, get involved, heckle, shout abuse. I mean, the bag of cans makes it easier for people to be a bit outlandish. Exactly, and they can be a bit more outlandish, and they might feel when they're in that environment that they're like, I could do something like this. So I think having those intimate settings, and Fight Factory is a great example of this, where the fans are right up there close to the ring, they can really get close to the action. So I think that's great in terms of encouraging more people to get involved, whether they want to be like a manager or a referee or like in production or a wrestler. There's a way to do it, and Fight Factory is a great place to do it.
That's next month. Rest of the year, what do you want to achieve?
So I'll be back across the pond next month, and in August, Canada debut is on the horizon, so that's exciting. Never been to Canada. Going to Winnipeg, Manitoba. Of Simpsons lore, that's it, back to Winnipeg. So very excited for that. And maybe Toronto as well. So those are kind of evolving situations right now. And then I would like to come back and do a couple more months here where I'm here consistently, because here now I'm like this kind of absent father that comes in and checks in, and he's there for a while but then he's gone. So I would like to have a kind of a more sustained period here, whether that's 3 to 6 months, and then to see where that takes me. And then, of course, in the coming years, Japan, Mexico will be very high on the list, and I think they're both attainable. It's just a case of staying injury free, staying healthy,
getting the doors open.
Exactly, staying motivated, and we'll see where it goes.
We'll keep an eye on your progress. Winnipeg, quite aside from we're going to turn the car around, is also the home of Don Callis.
That's right, yeah.
Kenny Omega, of Chris Jericho.
Absolutely.
Famously, remember someone said, go back to Toronto. He said, I'm from Winnipeg, you idiot. Which is a great SmackDown moment. Look, we'll keep an eye on your progress as well. Thanks a million for coming in and
my pleasure.
Sharing your story so far.
Yeah, thanks for having me.